Hey everyone, I just want to talk about things that I've been thinking about and things that are like important to me. And so I want to talk about precursor to success and how you can, I guess, I wouldn't say hack the system, but the awareness that you need to have so that you can move the needle toward the direction that you want to go. So I just want to talk about several concepts that are kind of pertinent and things that I'm thinking about and things that you probably never heard of before or no one ever talked to you about. Okay, so the first precursor or the first thing that you need to think about is how you were brought up or the environment you were in. Now this sounds really obvious, but it may not be obvious to certain people. But I can't remember where I read it from, or I remember actually it was from a video I was watching, and I got to look more into it. Excuse me. But they said that the human brain goes through many development stage, right? And you're like a sponge. So I think from the age of 3 to 5, you're like a sponge, and then from the age of like 8 to 12, you're like another sponge, and then the final sponge stage is around 21, right? And so I think from the age of like 15 to like 18 or 19, you're like a sponge. You crave excitement, ingenuity, you crave newness, right? And this is why like music, fashion, you know, it's consumed by young people, right? And so the young people crave that newness because the brain is trying to figure out the world and it's trying to like take information in, and it needs that novelty. And so as you get older, that your brain doesn't crave that novelty as much, you know what I mean? I mean, we still crave excitement stuff, but not when you're a teenager and you're like, man, this music's so cool, right? And you're always doing things that's different than your parents, or you're doing things that are so different. I'm not saying all of us, but most of us. So why is this important? Well, this guy talks about how the environment you're raised causes you to have a subconscious behavioral pattern, but not just a behavioral pattern, but the way you navigate the world. And you have to do more research on this because I might be like not use the exact medical term or psychology term. But he said that when you're growing up, there's a beta stage and a tetra stage, right? And he said that when you're like kind of helpless between the age of like 2 till like 8, you're in a tetra stage where maybe 2 to 5, you're subconsciously absorbing the world. And you're subconsciously absorbing the world because you need to figure out how to navigate the world. So as a baby or a child, you don't have the capacity to articulate your needs or desire. So you are watching, you're scanning your brain subconsciously, trying to understand the world so that you can be provided for. Now, why is this important? This is very, very important. How your parents or the people who raise you view money, love, relationship, life, loyalty, whatever, you're gonna soak that in on a subconscious level, and it's gonna affect you. It's gonna subconsciously, when you get older, you're gonna end up being so similar in ways that you were not aware of. Now, I'm not talking. Now, this doesn't happen across the board all the time, but I'm seeing it, right? So, for example, let's just say my parents, for example, I shot a video talking about this, or worker bees. You know, my father's a tailor, my mom's a seamstress, and you know, they started business and stuff, but they were never very successful. And in a way, I'm just like that. I start all these businesses, and you know, it's business success has been very elusive to me. Now, partly because the way they view business is a worker bee style, very solopreneur, like a 1 person to a 10-person operation. You know what I mean? Now imagine if you grew up in a family like Donald Trump, or a very successful family that runs like companies with 100 to 1,000 employees. While on a subconscious level, you're gonna see your father conduct business a certain way, conduct his life a certain way, talk to people a certain way. And on a subconscious level, you're gonna pick that up, right? And it may not translate over directly, but it will translate over, right? It's how Mother Nature raised us, because Mother Nature wants the survival of that species. And a way for that species to survive is an imprint. So, for example, my daughter, the way she navigates the world, even though she's very different to me, there's an imprint of how she navigates the world. You know what I mean? So why is this important? Because then it allows you to have a framework. Like, okay, my parents, I'm not saying my parents, but I'm just saying like your parents have a bad view of money or love or relationship. Well, you're gonna grow up having almost the same view, right? Even though you try to conduct things differently. So this guy, this scientist or whatever, I forget his name, I think his name is Lipman or whatever, and he said that sometimes you try to break out the cycle and you can't, because you're just anchored so deeply in that Tetra stage where you view money, for example. Let's just say you come from a blue-collar family and you just struggle and struggle. Like your dad brings home $1,000 a week, you struggle with that 1,000. Your dad brings home 2,000, you still struggle with the 2,000, because you just don't know how to save it. You don't know how to invest it. You don't know how to like budget. And so it's not the money, it's the mentality behind the money, right? Now the mentality is very important. Like for example, I'm living on 3.5 hours of sleep because I was up all night just editing a video because I wanted to shoot this video, put it on YouTube, and I started editing it. Before you know it, 3 hours went by. Now, in a way, this is very similar to my parents, because my parents will, they're tailor and seamstress, so they get clothing in, and they have to finish making it or altering it within a certain time frame, or else the customers will get mad. So if a customer brings in, so that day, for example, if 10 people happen to drop by with 10 different garments to alterate, my mom and dad will have to stay up all night working on it, because they have to finish it in a certain time frame. They can't say, well, you brought it in today, but we have 10 other garments, so it won't be finished till like Friday if they brought it in on Monday, because the customer expects a certain turnaround time, And so the only way to get around that is either hire more employees or work all night. And when you are a small business, you don't have that. Your business is always in an influx. There's no constant yet. And so you don't have the luxury or the budget to hire employees until you get to a certain level. So what ends up happening is you stay up all night working on it. So on a subconscious level, I absorb that, right? And so very important to figure out the Tetra stage, how you grew up. If you grew up in a family where very abusive, or you grew up in a family where your dad's a drug dealer, or you grew up in a family where your dad wasn't working, or your mom was the breadwinner of the house, subconsciously, as a guy or as a female, you're gonna view money and relationship and provider in almost very similar way. It's not gonna be direct, but it's gonna be like replicated in different scenarios, or you're gonna see repeat, right? Like in design, we're taught to create repetition, but not exactly the same. Like you can see it on a subtext. Okay, so Tetra stage, so look that up, very important. Once you understand that, then you don't fight it. You understand that that's an anchor. And then now you have awareness. A lot of times we try to fight things instead of saying, this is how I operate. First, you have awareness. That's very Zen-like. You have awareness, and Zen teaches there's no good or bad. There is just it. There's just presence. So you have awareness, and you say, okay, this is the way it is. And then you start creating a framework to change course, right? And if the course doesn't change, it's okay, because if you fight it too hard, it gets pushed back. But the most important thing is awareness and acceptance. This is who I am, this is how I was brought up, and it's bad. Let's slowly make adjustment to it. Versus like getting really angry because it's been imprinted, it's part of your identity. Okay, number two, I want to talk about this concept called the first teacher is your heart. This was introduced to me by a martial art instructor, and this concept is very important, very similar to the Tetra stage. And why is this important? The first teacher is your heart. Well, in almost every socialist movement or every dysfunctional society, they pass the teaching or parenting onto the government or onto an organization versus to your family or to your parents. Because when you're a child or a baby, your world is shaped by your parents. But what your parents value or love or care about, that's the heart. And because they love you, or they don't love you, or they don't love you, whatever the case may be, that's your teacher. Okay? If your parents love to work, or if your parents love money, or if your parents love each other, or love the church, or love, civic duty, you know what I mean? Subconsciously, you're gonna absorb that. I'm not gonna say it's exactly across the board all the time, but like I said again, Mother Nature, the survival of the species, one of the ways for the species to survive is imprint, you know what I mean? Now there's also genetic, right? You know what I mean? Like no matter how much you want something, Mother Nature will fight that because that's how Mother Nature wired you, right? But these are other variables in how you are shaped, in our case, as human beings. Okay, so the first teacher is your heart. And so why is this important? When a society push that away, or when a community do not raise their children and allow the government to raise it, that's when there's high dysfunctionality, right? And so you look at like certain community in America, high dysfunctionality because they don't have parents, right? And so they don't have the first teacher. And by the time they get to school, they're like way behind, right? Like I'm not gonna talk about any specific demographic group. I'm just gonna say, let's just say the average 5-year-old, when they get to school, they know all the colors already, they know how to count, they know how to walk to the grocery store and identify the fruits, they know how to conduct themselves when they're lining up. And then these other kids don't know how to do that. So when they get to school, they're already way behind. There's about a 3-year developmental stage that they're missing out on. And then on top of that, they're trying to learn all these new information, right? And so the brain's overstimulated. The brain is like, shit, this is what's going on. Like I'm trying to learn all these, like how to count and how to sing the alphabet. On top of that, I'm trying to learn how to conduct myself in a social setting, you know? And so when the brain gets agitated, the brain can either collapse under stress or it can rebel, right? Because it gets overstimulated. So very important about stimulation. Okay, so I want to talk about another thing that I've been thinking about a lot. I forget the exact psychology term or science term for it. I might write it in the description, so make sure you look at the description. But they talk about learning behaviors, right? And there's a term for it. So there's certain learning behaviors where you want that feedback loop to come quickly, right? So for example, the game of chess, the feedback, checkers, the game of checkers, the feedback loop comes in really quick. You learn how to play the game really quick, you see the result really quick when you play the game of checkers. So there's not a lot of strategy involved, right? And so you can literally learn how to play the game of checkers in 1 hour, right? And it won't take you a whole lifetime to master. It might take you, at the most, at the most 10 hours, right? Now chess will take you a lifetime. Chess, you will have to read volumes and volumes of books just to play at a very high level. And to play at the grandmaster level, like a level where you get ranking and people know your name and people actually pay you money and you win prizes, that's like thousands upon thousands of hours. And then you need coaches, and you need to have the ability to think very forward ahead. Now the problem with activities like that, the feedback loop is longer. In other words, you may practice all these drills and all these scenarios, and then you won't know that your practice or the way you play the game will shape if you're going to become a champion till hundreds and thousands of hours later, right? Another example is, let's just say playing the violin or piano, right? You may have to drill the progression hours and hours before, maybe after 100 hours, you can finally play something at a high level, like a concerto. Same with the violin. Now, on the other hand, a guitar or a ukulele, maybe 5-6 hours, and you can already drum out something that people can hear and say, oh, this is, they'll clap and they'll sing to it. So not everything is at the same level. Like learning how to play the guitar learning how to play the violin or the piano takes way longer before you get that satisfaction, that result that you're looking for, right? So why is this important? Well, you go to school and everyone gets let's just say you go to university, right? And you get a bachelor degree in like some liberal arts course, like history or psychology, versus a bachelor degree in a STEM course, like applied science, applied math. Let's be honest with ourselves. Applied science degree is much more difficult to get than a liberal art degree in psychology or philosophy, right? One course you're studying, you're just reading and writing essays and whatever and having class discussion. And the other course, you're like sitting there drilling, trying to figure out the math formula, and you have to know it so well. Not just know it from a memory perspective, but really have to solve the problem because there's real world application. You're trying to create a rocket ship or propel a car or save energy on movement. And so the result is not instantaneous. Like in other words, you may have to study way harder and then finally say, I understand the subject matter. Versus, let's just say you do philosophy. Well, you read about it, then you write an essay on it, and then boom, you're on to the next philosopher or whatever, right? So, why is this important? Well, if you want to make a lot of money, or if you want to be highly esteemed in a certain field, certain fields pay more than others because the stimulus, the feedback loop takes longer, right? For example, you play the game of basketball. You get the excitement right away, right? I mean, maybe after 10 hours, you're learning to dribble, you're running up and down the court. And certain games, certain activities, thousands of hours before you finally say, okay, I can finally play that game. Because it's not fun, right? It's not fun until a certain level. Then you have the skill to make it fun. And so you have to understand that certain activities, the stimuli do not come back right away. It's not fun, it's not exciting. The payoff is not instantaneous. And so you have to push through. And if you navigate the world or you stick to that activity due to the payoff, due to the stimuli, then it's very short-sighted. Now what happened is some of us are wired for very long-term thinking, right? Now they say that Asian people, Chinese people, Japanese, Korean, we're wired for very long-term thinking. Like we'll do some activities or we'll study, and then we know that it won't get paid off till like 4 or 5 years later, right? And there's a saying in the Asian culture, it's called long suffering. So we have to suffer for a very long time, and then finally we get the result or the desired outcome that we want, right? And Malcolm Gladwell, I'm not sure how accurate it is, but he analyzed culture, right, in his book, and a lot of people debunk what he teaches, but let's just say what he wrote is, let's just say 80% accurate. Then it explains a lot of things about how the Asian culture operates. More specifically, the Asian culture that comes from the Han, right? H-A-N-S, Han. Like the Hans are Chinese, and out of the Chinese comes the Japanese and Korean, right? And the word Hanzi or Hanji, or in Japanese is Kanji, and it means the language of the Hans people, right? And so we have the Chinese culture, and then the Japanese, use the Chinese writing system, and then they develop their own, and same with the Korean. So in a way, the Japanese and Korean can trace the phenotype back to the Chinese. So in Malcolm Gladwell's book, it talks about cultivating rice, and it's a very laborious process. Now, modern farming probably doesn't need that, but up until recently, it involves the whole village, and you have to water rice with a certain amount of water. If there's too much water, the rice field will get damaged. If it's too little water, we'll get drought. And then, because rice is the staple of our diet, we pay a lot of attention to it. We create a culture, a system around cultivating rice. And so we're very meticulous. We teach our children, we teach our society to have long suffering, to work as a community, to push through, and it's okay to wait for things to come to us much later in life. And then Malcolm Gladwell analyzed this and compared this to like other cultures. I forget which other cultures, but I'll just give an example: wheat or corn. While wheat and corn to plant doesn't take as much attention, right? You just throw it to the ground, water it, and then I don't know however long you come back and there's corn, right? So not everything is the same. Like growing rice takes way more time, way more attention than growing corn or wheat or whatever. And so when you have a society that grows certain crop, it shapes that society, right? Imagine you just plant corn, you just dump it in, and then you just leave it. That means you have time to do other things, to spend time with your family or to go on trips and stuff, right? And so therefore, your environment will value things differently. So long suffering, that's something that Asian cultures, we have a word for that. So we talked about Tetra stage, how on a subconscious level, you watch the world because you're so helpless as a child, and then it imprints on you, and then when you grow up, you repeat that behavioral pattern. It's not really a behavioral pattern, it's a value pattern, it's a value system where you value certain things, you know what I mean? And not just value, but it's basically an operating system, right? I grew up in the world of DOS, this operating system, and that was a very primitive computer system. It taught the computer how to operate the disk drive, right? And that's how Microsoft came about, was the DOS, disk operating system. Like Windows sold DOS to IBM, so that it was a bunch of code to read that disk, so that they could read the program from it, right? So basically that's how Windows came about, the backdoor entry basically. And that's your operating system, right? And so that's how you view the world, how you navigate life, etc. The second thing I talked about was the first teacher is your heart, and it's about taking responsibility as a society, as a family, right? You cannot pass that responsibility on to external sources. You cannot pass that responsibility to the government. The government always want to do it because they want to shape your children so that it can perpetuate a system that they want. The system can be good or bad, it doesn't matter. They just want ownership of your children. And this is why in like socialist countries, they emphasize education so much. And if you're stupid, you think, oh, the government wants my children to be educated. No, they want your children to be indoctrinated. And especially with modern day technology now, you can teach your children almost anything. And what you cannot teach your children is the heart, the attitude, the value system, right? And so you need to teach that first. And then the intellectual, the know-how, the specific can be taught using AI, it can be Google, it can be anything. It's so easy. Knowledge is so accessible now, but the value system and your operating system is so hard to come by. You gotta really avoid buzzwords, right? Like people will throw out buzzword because it makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you're solving a problem, right? When people don't dig in deep, you know, like, oh, you know, you gotta be successful, you gotta have work ethic, this and that. But then you gotta look deeper and say, you know, why is this child, this person not successful? Well, maybe they have really good work ethic, but every small micro movement or action, the operating system is faulty, right? So they work really hard, but they work hard for the wrong thing. I know I'm talking in circle, but let's go back, okay? The guy who goes around and collects cans, well, he works fucking hard, okay? Like, he walks around and he collects cans, he digs through every garbage can, recycling bin, like, you know the guy, the homeless guy with a garbage bag, right? And he might work the whole day just to make like 20 bucks. Now the business owner worked really hard too. He sits behind the computer, behind his desk, he's making phone calls, he's networking, he's crunching numbers. And after a day, if you divide how much he makes by the year, by the days, let's just say he's a super successful business owner, $1,000 a day. Okay, we're talking about just the average guy, business owner, right? You know, $1 million. They both work hard. It's just that this guy choose to spend his time crunching numbers, networking, okay? So the minute you ask him, hey, go to the street and collect cans, he won't do it. He won't do it. Or he will do it, but his brain's constantly thinking about like, hey, how can I make this into a venture? How can I make this into a money-making vehicle? How can I make it so that I can make money and not just dig through every garbage can? So he might go out there and borrow money or network or invest in something, or he might hire 10 guys to dig through garbage can, and he'll give 10 guys 90% of the cut and he takes 10%. But now he's not out there collecting cans. He's out there processing the can. You get what I'm saying? So his operating system is much, much different. So I'm gonna probably end it here because I lost my train of thought. But I hope you guys find my video insightful and interesting. And I'm not gonna do too much of an edit because I feel like the rawness is important. All right, I'll talk to you guys later.